excited. We're just going to move ahead with the next point on the PowerPoint. Excellent, thank you. So this is me. I am a Robin. This is my sign name, and I'm from SDHHS, Saskatchewan Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. I work with early childhood and family services. I am the moderator for this evening's webinar. I'll be monitoring the chat, making sure that everything is moving along very smoothly without any glitches. A few things that we need to just go through this evening before we begin. Excellent. I'd like to do a land acknowledgement to begin with. I acknowledge that we stand on the land of Canada, from the west to the east, and from the north and the south, and all across Canada. We honor the diversity of Indigenous people and their contributions, including the resources, the materials, the trees, the water, and so much more than that. Also, let's remember that we have the opportunity to reaffirm our relationship with one another with respect and with commitment to moving forward together. Thank you again. I also acknowledge that I am standing here on the land in Saskatchewan, which is part of Treaty 4, Treaty 6, Treaty 8, and Treaty 10 territories. And to keep in mind, too, that we have collaborated with 2 other provinces, Ontario and British Columbia. Thank you so much. Next slide, please. We're very excited to have this collaboration from 3 organizations, from Deaf Children's Society in British Columbia, and Silent Voice in Ontario, and Saskatchewan Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services. This is for parents. This webinar is for parents who have deaf or hard of hearing children, so that they can learn more information. And we've invited a number of professionals throughout the community that have emailed and said they were interested in being a part of this presentation. Next PowerPoint, please. And we've provided the email address there for you if you have any questions as well for the parents. And just a few things before we start the webinar, just a few housekeeping things. I just wanted you to know that keep in mind that we are recording this webinar. And the purpose for that is for the people that aren't able to make it here tonight. And I want them to be able to have an opportunity to review this. So we're going to upload it to YouTube later. And we will put it on different social medias to let people know that it's there as well, that they can then go to YouTube and watch that. This environment, we really want to have people keep in mind that this is a safe place for everyone. We want parents to really feel safe, for them to express their stories, their questions, their concerns. We want them to feel very at home here, so that they can reach out to anyone in regards to information. We're just asking the professionals that have joined us here tonight to please keep that in mind, that this is a safe place for parents. And now I'm excited to let you know that our presenter tonight is Dr. Gail Goldstein, and she's going to be talking about executive function. So this is the sign that we're using, executive function. So we're really looking forward to hearing what she has to say and what's in store for us tonight. At the end, when she's done, we will have a Q&A. And also Gail herself, she'll be able to, she has told us that feel free at any time throughout a presentation. If you want to interject and ask a question, please do so along the way, and she will answer any questions that come from that. And then when we're done, we'll just have a little bit of a wrap up, and then we'll close for the evening. So now, without further ado, let's have Dr. Gail Goldstein. Now we can upload her PowerPoint presentation as well. Great, thank you. All right, thanks so much.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. Whoop. Give me a moment here. I was hoping it would be the change in the PowerPoint that they were showing earlier, but that is not the case. All right. Hello, everyone. I am Dr. Gail Goldstein, and my name sign is a G. And we'll go on to the next slide. Before I actually start, get the next slide. Yep. No? I don't know. Is there a next slide? Good, there it is. I just want you to know that I am a psychologist and I'm licensed in Ontario specifically, which means the intent of my presentation is to just give you information. I'm not going to be providing any therapy or specific guidance in any way, shape, or form. I do not have licensure in other provinces. If somebody does reach out and contact me for therapy or support, I cannot do that because I'm only licensed here in Ontario because this is where I reside. And I just want people to know that there is no conflict of interest. And that's why I wanted to make sure I was very transparent at the onset. Okay, next slide. All right, well, to tell you a little bit about myself, I am a CODA and a SODA. My parents are deaf. And I do have a brother, a sibling, who is also deaf, and I was the only one that wasn't deaf in my family. So I use ASL as well as use spoken English. It's 9:15 here in Ontario, so I'm a wee bit exhausted. My signing will decline rather quickly very soon because it's getting late. So we will be switching it over to have the interpreter sign for me. My background is that I attended university at York University, and I went to my master's program there, and I worked with the deaf community as well as the autism community. I use the sign like this for autism. So with my study, my work, I work with deaf individuals as well as individuals who have autism, whether they're young or as adults. My graduate work included training at the provincial school, at the School for the Deaf, and a mental health organization called PAH, P-A-H. Now I have my own private practice, and I work with deaf and hearing individuals, and I also have work with different school boards offering assessments and consultation. So in my private practice, I can do assessments, I can do therapy, I can do group work, group therapy, consultations. And I continue to work with both the hearing population and the deaf population. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, so now I'm going to switch modalities, and I will then be speaking in English because I find it really hard to hear an interpreted version of myself.
Okay, I'm going to put my hands away. All right, so tonight's discussion is about executive functions. And I want to share with you a little bit for those who don't know what executive functions are. I want to talk about what they are, where they are, what they do for us. And I'm going to talk more generally to begin with. And then I will get into how we see executive functions in deaf and hard of hearing children and teenagers and adults. And then we'll talk a little bit about how to support executive functioning. Okay. All right. Okay, and I'm going to keep an eye on my interpreters. Okay. So our executive functions, they are in our frontal lobe. That is right behind our foreheads. And it's the biggest part of our brains. And it's what sets us apart from other mammals. We have the largest developed frontal lobe. Okay. And it allows us to do lots of different kinds of thinking and different physical actions. Okay. So if we think about it, it's like the organizer of our brain. It's the orchestra conductor or the office manager of our brains. So I have 3 admin and they tell me where to go in my schedule. I do my job. And when someone asks me to schedule a new session, I say, nope, I will not do that. You contact admin because I will look at the schedule and double book them in the same day. Okay, so my admin are my executive functions. Next. Okay, so we have different skills and abilities that come with our executive functions. So we have the cognitive actions. And so as you can see there, and I'm going to go through each of these things as we go along. So I'm not going to go through all of them right now, but a lot of that, if you think about your child's report cards or your students' report cards, all of those learning skills that we see, such as initiative, collaborating, all of those things, those are executive functions. So the teachers are providing lots of information about how a student is doing in the classroom. Okay. And these actions here are generally driven by what we call dopamine and GABA. Okay. And when we either have too much or too little, we can see challenges regulating. Now, these are our physical actions that our frontal lobe takes care of. Okay. And so when so you can see speech control, that sometimes can also be related to sign control as well. So finding words, but that can also be a different part of our brain as well. We're not going to really talk about that today. So when we have challenges with these areas, we can see things like tics, stims, okay, right? Or challenges with the articulation of oral language, so using our mouths to speak, and or sign language production, so ASL production. This one. Okay, so when we are born, our brains are not fully developed, especially our frontal lobe. That is the last part to develop. Okay, so in fact, it's actually the brain stem and back here that is the most developed when we're born, because those are our basic functions, such as eating and sleeping and pooping. Okay. Now, so when we think about toddlers, toddlers have no executive functions. Now, they need adults to help them. Okay, so when do executive functions start to develop? Around age 5, 6, so around school age. We might see some variance, maybe a little earlier. Usually it's around that age though, okay? And so we start to begin to see attention and inhibiting behaviors at that age. So when we think about your child going to school, sitting in circle time or paying attention to a book or a show, that's when we start to see that a little bit more. Okay. Now, it really comes online in middle childhood. Okay. And we start to see what we call working memory. And I'm going to explain that a little more later. Planning, complex problem solving, but we still need a lot of support from adults. So that's why we are still repeating, get your lunch bag, get your backpack, don't forget your hat. Did you remember your homework? All of those things, okay? Because they're not ready. Okay. Now, in adolescence, we see the biggest brain growth that is similar to infancy. Okay, we call it myelination. So it means then that the connections in the brain are really solidifying. They're really starting to take hold. Okay, and so now we see decision making, monitoring of self, although we could argue that time is also not so great for teenagers. But we're starting to really see that. Okay, and by about 25, so young adulthood, we are now generally developed because now we've got exposure, we've got practice, and we've got all of these now experience. Okay, now we get a good few years and then it's all downhill after that. Next one. Okay, so let's start with specific executive functions. So we're going to go through some of the big ones that as a psychologist, these are things that I'm looking for and I'm wondering about and I'm monitoring so that we can ensure that kids and teenagers and even adults are supported in academic situations, work situations, and home environments. Okay. So the first one we're going to talk about is attention regulation, and this is a big one. Okay. So what is this, right? So it's the ability to avoid distractions, to be able to concentrate on tasks. So even tasks that are demanding or uninteresting, learning new information, attending to instructions or even conversations. Okay. So it's that ability to really pick up on information in your environment as well. So are we aware of what's happening? For example, if people are running outside very quickly and we're not paying attention to that, we may have missed a big cue. It's also the ability to kind of switch between tasks or modes or environments. So, for example, for those who play video games, right, their attention is probably really amazing. Can we then kind of attend to something else? Now, we'll also talk about that because that is also in terms of cognitive flexibility. Okay. So when we have challenges with attention regulation, we might see zoning out, daydreaming. We might see hyperfocus, so really zoning in and then not knowing that they needed to go to the bathroom or that they haven't eaten. It might be missing information or paying lots of detail, like lots of attention to very small details that aren't important. It can also look like easily tired. And maybe needing some more time to have transitions, or that we might see switching too quickly. And again, that leads to cognitive flexibility. Okay. Oh, any questions? All right. Let's talk about emotion regulation. Okay, so what is that? I'm sure lots of people, this is a new thing, especially with parenting since COVID. How do we co-regulate with our kids? Right? Okay, so it's our ability to control our emotions. It is not feeling emotions. It's feeling the emotion and managing that emotion. Okay. Particularly if we're managing kind of small things, right? So I can't find my sock, or I forgot my glasses upstairs. Okay. So when we talk about emotion regulation, it's about kind of responding in a way that is kind of appropriate to the problem. Right? So I'll give an example. I have a client who is struggling a little bit right now, and this is where the glasses example came from. Came downstairs to do some homework and forgot their glasses. And parents suggested that they may want to go get their glasses before they do their homework. And there was a meltdown. Yeah, right. Rather than saying, "Ugh, I don't want to go back upstairs. Trudge, trudge, trudge." Okay. So challenges that we might see might be like that example, very highly sensitive, maybe over responding to cues of others. We also might see the opposite, low responsivity. So maybe not very responsive to emotions around them. We might see some strong responses, and we might not see very many responses at all. Now, I want to be clear that that doesn't mean it's that either strong responses or under responses don't always mean that we have a huge or significant problem. Rather, it's something that we want to support, and we want to figure out what's contributing to that. Okay, talked about, oh, ready? Oh, Barb. Oh, yes, I'm talking, you're signing, sorry. Okay. All right. So I already started to talk about cognitive flexibility, right? So what is that? So it's our ability to kind of adjust our behavior, kind of meet the environment, right? So if it's quiet time, am I screaming and banging and playing very loudly? Or can I adjust and maybe do something a little quieter? Okay. It's also about how we solve problems. So do we continue to try the same thing over and over and solve the problem over and over in the same way? Or do we step back and say, that didn't work. I need to do something else. Okay. It's also about having different ideas of how to do things and then kind of approach things in different ways. Okay. So this is where I put that little picture, that think outside the box. That's our ability to do that. And that comes easier for some people and harder for others. And neither is better or worse, right or wrong. It just is. So, but when we do have significant challenges, we might see resistance to trying new things, adapting to changes, navigating social interactions. Those ones are hard because we have an infinite number of social interactions that can happen. We never know. So that's kind of going with the flow. Right? We might also see that hyper focus, right? So wanting to spend all of their time on a particular topic or to talk about a certain topic. That can also be a really good thing, right? So that's why I use the word differences as well. So sometimes it's challenges, sometimes it's differences, right? Without folks who can also be perseverative, who really hyper focus, we wouldn't have computers. We wouldn't have trains. Okay. So we need those creative thinkers. We need that thinking outside the box. And we need the thinkers who really, really focus in. And they tend to work well together. Any questions? All right. Inhibitory control. What does that mean? I quite liked this picture. Yeah. So it's our ability to really control our behavior. So a toddler, not happening. So we could be in a store and they will be on the floor. They do not have inhibitory control. Okay. So it's our ability to also stop responses, right? Inhibit responses. So just because we're thinking it doesn't mean we say it or do it. Okay. It also is about our ability to kind of stay on tasks, right? So not get distracted, right? Or if we're distracted, to bring ourselves back. And also to kind of keep our plans, our commitments, right? Okay. So some differences or challenges that we might be able to see is some people are really great at ignoring distractions, and some people are constantly distracted. And that can be really hard to get things done. Sometimes we can see acting before thinking. I once had a client who spent all their OSAP money that was meant for university. And the same person rode on the trunk of a moving car and had a big concussion. Yeah. So that individual was going along with their impulses. Yeah. And then sometimes it might be also ignoring information. So that's where I said, the ability to ignore distractions. Okay, initiation. So getting going. Okay, so for kiddos, it's getting going on things that you've asked them to do, right? Or to think of it and just get started, like cleaning their room or putting away their dishes or emptying out their backpacks. That's a big one in my house. Okay, it's also about being motivated. Okay. And kind of taking leadership sometimes. Okay. Some differences, challenges that we can see is that we can see procrastination and avoidance. We can see high levels of motivation or lower levels of motivation. It's trying to figure out how to prioritize tasks. So when we get to the university level, everything is a priority. So how do we figure out what actually comes first? Okay. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay. And then we can see that, let's say your child has a very messy room or locker or desk, and they're asked to clean it. We might see them just standing there going, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to get started. So they might be overwhelmed, maybe uncertain, not knowing what to do. Okay, so that leads us to organization, as I was just saying. So how do we manage all of those things, right? So It's managing physical things. It's also managing tasks, right? So projects like a book report. Where do I start? Do I do the whole thing at once? How do I know where to start? Okay. It also might be organizing our thoughts to express them either through language, so orally or verbally, so sign, also on paper. Okay. All right. And we also see managing time. Okay. So we might see then that it could be hard to prioritize and break down the tasks into more manageable parts. Some people are really great at that. We might see people who are disorganized, or might be organized chaos, or I think her name is Mary Kondo. She had an organization show, and we have or Monica from Friends, who was extremely organized. Okay. Yeah. Okay. It also can impact the ability to kind of estimate how long things will take. And then following kind of a logical order to complete the task or to express thoughts. Okay, so this leads us to monitoring. All right. So, yeah, and it's kind of that internal, am I doing what I should be doing when I should be doing it? So it's also noticing, did I make a mistake there? Right? Knowing when to ask for help. And knowing when something's done or needs more work. So what we might see is differences in self-awareness. So is someone aware of their own emotions and behaviors? Okay. And so when we don't have, when that's a more of a challenge, we might see more dysregulation. Um, we might have more difficulty, or we might be really good at identifying strategies that aren't helpful. Time management. So we have a term called time blindness. So missing appointments altogether, maybe forgetting the day, or showing up at a time when the appointment or the event was either before or it's another time altogether. Okay. Monitoring also works with that adapting to situations, so that cognitive flexibility. All right. So it's saying, wait, this is a funeral, and now is probably not time for that joke, if no one else is telling jokes. So I should probably then talk about something else or do something else. It also helps us to figure out how difficult something might be. And that helps us with planning and organizing then. And then monitoring helps us to figure out, am I off track? Am I zoned out? Am I distracted? Oh, wait, get back. Okay. So these are some of the things that we might see when there's some challenges or differences with monitoring. Okay, working memory. So what is this one? Okay. Sorry. Working memory. Okay. So this is our ability to hold in multiple pieces of information, problem solve with it, and provide a response. Okay. It's multitasking. Okay. It's when you tell your child, get your lunch bag, put on your coat, put on your boots, meet me at the door. They have not brought their lunch bag. Or all of those. Okay. That's why we see that. All right. So what do we see? What's working memory for? Where are the challenges? Harder to follow directions, complete multi-step tasks, things like mental arithmetic, remembering new information, writing, planning, and decision making. So you can see how all of our executive functions go together. They work together. And writing and mental math are ones that have a lot of executive functioning processes that go into them. They're not simple things. Okay. So when we have challenges, I'm going to speak a little bit more to challenges with executive functions. That might tell us that we might have some diagnoses on board. Okay. So one of those, and I was just talking about writing and mental math and reading, is that when we have challenges with executive functioning, it may tell us that we have a learning disability on board. Okay. Now, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, so ADHD, so this is a neurodevelopmental difference, okay? And it is a disability. And it's highlighted by challenges and differences in executive functioning. Okay, so we specifically look at executive functions. Now, many ADHDers are outside of the box thinkers, super flexible, maybe too flexible because they're changing all the time and so on. So we look for those things. So it's not always about can't. And you'll notice that when I talked about attention and emotion, I used the words regulation because it's about the regulation. ADHDers can do a wonderful job of focusing. It depends on how and where and how long. So those are the things we're looking for. It's not about they can't pay attention and they're always moving, because that's not accurate. Okay, I just wanted to put that in there. Executive functions may also, so autistic folks, oh, Ready? Okay. Many autistic folks can also demonstrate differences and challenges with executive functions. And so when we do an assessment, I'm very curious about what those differences and challenges might be. But executive functions don't necessarily tell us that someone is autistic. Whereas that's a little different for ADHD. Okay. Now, for individuals where there's intellectual disability, we are going to see executive functioning challenges. Okay. And that does not mean that they're an ADHDer. It's different because they inherently do not have the cognitive ability to be able to problem solve. So we're going to see significant challenges with executive functions. That's where we do a cognitive assessment. That's where it's very important to have that differentiation. Okay. Now, anxiety disorders, mood disorders can have an impact on executive functions. However, executive functions can also impact anxiety and mood. We can also see that social maturity also is correlated. So a lot of times, a lot of our researchers will talk about ADHDers, so kids with ADHD, where there are more quote unquote delays. So they seem less mature than their peers who are not ADHDers. Now, we don't have causality, we don't know, but we know that there's a correlation there. Any questions? Okay, so what do we know can actually impact our executive function? So generally, our executive functions are, once we're an adult, they're kind of stable. However, as I said, we get a short time with them. All right, so we know that how our senses, so we have 8 senses, and that's a whole other presentation. But we know that our sensory functioning can impact our executive functions. So for example, I'm speaking because for me to hear myself, if I were to sign, would have impacted my working memory, my flexibility, my freedom from distractibility. Okay. Now, our energy levels impact us, right? So it's 10 o'clock here in Ontario. I've been up for a while. It's going to go downhill from here soon, right? And if we haven't had a lot of sleep, or we're not eating well, we might notice when we're physically ill, right? When we have COVID or the flu or something, we're not great, right? It's harder to remember things. It's harder to take in new information. Okay. It, can depend on what's going on in your day, right? So if we think about parents of young kids or teenagers, and there's a lot going on, right? Okay. We want to think about environmental variables. So I find if the TV is on, people are talking, someone is asking for my attention, and the dog is barking, not going to happen. I can't regulate my attention, or I can't take in new information. So in that moment, I don't have executive functioning. Okay. We also want to be thinking about age, right? So especially, as we get older, menopausal, perimenopausal, folks, or older individuals, right, can experience decline in executive functions. Okay. We can also see, though, in individuals where we've had concussion, brain injury, or cognitive disease, okay, brain cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, those sorts of things. That's going to impact our executive functions. Okay, all right, next. Okay, so let's get into why you're here. Okay, all right. So we do have some research, not a huge ton, but we do have some research, which is great. So we are recognizing that there is a difference between hearing and deaf and hard of hearing children and their executive functions. Okay. Now, we need to remember that this research is sometimes based on small numbers. Our deaf and hard of hearing community is extremely heterogeneous, meaning there's a lot of variability. So it can be hard for us to say this is exactly what's going on, but we're making general assumptions. Okay. So in general, we're seeing that deaf and hard of hearing kiddos have more difficulty on specific executive functioning assessment tasks. So this is when we bring them in and do some tasks with them, or when we ask parents and teachers to provide observations. Okay. So this is where I think it's important that we say that there is variability within the deaf and hard of hearing community because we have differences in family setup, language use, and school differences. So we have to account for all that. Okay. We also know that there's a higher co-occurrence of neurodevelopmental differences that are associated with executive functioning for deaf and hard of hearing kiddos. Okay. And we're not sure why, so I'm not going to get into that. Okay. Our research is nowhere near what I'd like it to be or what we'd like it to be in order to answer that question. And unfortunately, I think a lot of our research on hearing children with neurodevelopmental differences, ADHD, autism, etc., also needs to be redone. I think it's outdated because we've missed We've missed female identifying kiddos. We've missed kiddos of color. We've missed a lot of information. So we're way behind, I think. Okay. So, as a psychologist, when I'm thinking about and considering, and when I look at the research, we have to consider our deaf and hard of hearing kiddos. Who are they born to? Right? So, what is the family composition? Are parents deaf and hard of hearing? One deaf or hard of hearing, one hearing? Are both hearing? What kind of language? Are we signing, not signing, oral, signed English? What does that look like? So we have to take that into consideration when we're talking about executive functioning as well. Okay. Now, so to take consideration schools, right? So when a child attends a mainstream program, do they have language accessibility support? So an FM system, an interpreter, visual information. Okay. Are they in a segregated classroom, but still in a public or a hearing school? So what kind of language is provided in that kind of a classroom? So are there still accessibility supports? Right. So that's going to impact executive functioning. And then we have deaf schools. Okay. What kind of language and classroom supports are provided there? So all of these different kinds of classrooms are going to support executive functions and the development of them in different ways, just as a family and parents or guardians or carers will develop at home as well. Okay. So what we know from our research, though, is that the more a child has to keep track of in terms of working memory. So if they're having to keep track of the whiteboard and the teacher and potentially an interpreter or an FM, listening on an FM system, it's going to strain. It's going to put strain and create potential fatigue. So we have to make sure that regardless of the environment and the situation, that we're supporting those language needs. So for example, having both a verbal signed or oral modality plus a visual modality, pictures, words, so that they can come back to that. And that reduces the load. Right? So, for example, our lovely interpreters tonight are having to listen to me, and sometimes I forget I'm speaking too fast, or I've started to use my hands again, and they're having to keep track of me and what I'm saying, and also interpret, right? That they're translating it. And that requires working memory, that requires planning and organizing of the information, because English to ASL is different. Right? And so that's the same in the classroom, it's the same in any environment. And if we think about a child or a teenager whose executive functions are still developing, we need to support that. So all of that is to say, right? So our executive functions do not impact language development. Remember, our language development starts before executive functioning development. So that tells us that healthy executive functioning is not dependent, right, on it's not dependent on the ability to hear, right, or auditory experiences, okay? Okay, so executive functions are dependent on language development. We have most of our research on executive functioning for deaf and hard of hearing students demonstrates that, okay? So language development is the biggest predictor, okay? And for both hearing and deaf and hard of hearing kids. Okay, so what that means is we need lots and lots of language exposure and accessible language. Okay, so I know that in a world where we have cochlear implants, and cochlear implants have been very successful for some and not successful for others. And we have to keep that in mind, that a CI alone is not the best predictor of executive development because it does not guarantee language development. It may help, maybe, but not for every child. So it comes back to what we do know, accessible language. All right, so what our research is telling us is that, in fact, bilingual or multilingual kiddos actually demonstrate really nice executive functioning development. Okay. Now, the CI kiddos that have developed fluent oral language do demonstrate executive functions that are more developed than deaf or hard of hearing children who do not have language fluency. Okay. Kiddos with CIs, though, don't always, though, appear similar to their hearing peers. The jury's still out. We're still exploring that. All right. And so what we do know is that sign language proficiency, so this is around the world, so I can't say it's just ASL. Okay. But we know that when we have some sign language proficiency, there's a positive correlation with core executive functions. And it seems to be similar to hearing. Now, I know that that seems in contrast to what I've just said about CI users. So again, the research is still working on it. Okay, what it's telling us though is that again, and I'm going to keep saying it, more language we have, the better executive functioning development we have. There does seem to be a strong correlation there. I may even dare to say causality. Okay. Any questions? Okay. All right. So, oh, okay. Drink. Okay. Now, our research is showing that, in fact, actually, deaf and hard of hearing kiddos demonstrate actually pretty good inhibitory control and set shifting. Now, my experience in a deaf school and in a deaf house, when I, was coming across this research, went, I'm not so sure about that. However, what the research is finding is that because particularly in sign language, again, we're going to say this is around the world, that for kiddos that are using sign, because they have to be attending visually, okay, and they can't turn away and just listen, that they have to inhibit their behavior more. Okay. And they have to be able to shift more, especially in group settings where the next person might be talking, because it's not passive listening, it is active watching. Okay. So the research is suggesting that this can be helpful for deaf and hard of hearing kiddos with regulating behavior and emotions, and helpful with quality of life. Okay. So I'm already talked about that. And so this can be helpful with improving working memory, monitoring, right? So kind of noticing when it's okay to jump in and say something, or to start talking. Okay. Yeah. And if we think about deaf culture, right? There are some unsigned rules about waiting and watching and noticing certain expressions, right? Or watching for certain signs to know, that person has finished what they've said. Right? It's kind of how I'm watching my interpreters, so I know when to start talking again, right? Or when to wait. All right. So how are we doing for time? Okay, good. All right. So what do we do? So I said it, the last 3 slides, accessible language. Okay, whatever that looks like, accessible language. We want lots and lots of exposure to language. I think I'm preaching to the choir. Okay. Now, it may also be helpful to think about, could an assessment be helpful for your child? I'm biased. It's what I do for a living. But I also think that everybody should have an assessment. And I realize that's a very privileged thing to have, and there's not a lot of accessibility. And I say that, and I want to recognize that I'm speaking to people in Saskatchewan and BC, and it's really hard to get services for your deaf and hard of hearing kiddo, and I want to recognize that. Okay. So if you can, if it's possible, an assessment. Here's the thing. If you're going to get an assessment, you need someone who understands deaf culture, deaf language, or if you have a child who is a CI user or is oral, it's understanding those things and what executive functioning can look like. We may want to be thinking about academic supports, right? So does your child have genuine challenges or differences with executive function? How do we support them, both at home and academically? And we may want to think about, like, how do we develop executive functioning skills? So notice I've talked about skills and not abilities. Abilities are things that we're born with. Generally, they're stable throughout our life. Skills are things that we can develop and we can, sorry, I got distracted. I apologize. And so, lost my train of thought. So skills we can develop and we can hone and we can support, okay? All right, so what are some things that you can do? All right. So we want to slowly build, just like when you're teaching a child how to walk. We don't just let them go. All right, we're holding on to them and then we're slowly kind of letting go. And then we're behind them. And so we're doing the same thing here. So we might provide step-by-step instructions. We might provide visual aids. We might break tasks down. We want to make sure that processing has happened. So if I've given an instruction, I might need to pause. I might need to double check. Did you get what I was saying? Can you tell me what I said? I might need to repeat. Okay. We might need to show them and model how to plan and organize and strategize, especially for new things, new tasks that they've not encountered before. And we want to practice. We want to allow. We can't expect that after showing them once that they'll just be able to do it. Okay? We need to allow for practice. Just like any of us when we're learning something new.
We're just waiting for, so can you see me? All right, we just need to turn the audio on, we have a question from Tara. Maybe you saw that in the chat as well, Gail. She says, I'm hearing a lot in the presentation about cochlear implants and hearing aids as well. I'm hearing that a lot, so I'm wondering if you can respond to that question.
So I have not mentioned hearing aids because our research actually didn't include much about children who were wearing their hearing aids or not. So I think it's hard for me to really comment on that. if I were to extrapolate or provide my thoughts based on working with kiddos, I think hearing aids provide more accessibility to information. I can't tell you, though, if they support executive functioning development. Our research doesn't provide that information. And again, I think it speaks to all the variability that we have in our deaf and hard of hearing community.
Great, thanks so much. I hope that helps answers that question for you. Also, if you have any other questions, feel free to just let us know and we will interject and Gail can address those.
And you can see in real time distractibility. Okay. Yeah. I don't know if Robin wants to.
So your video, if you turn your video on, did you have a question? Anna, you have a question? Nothing's there. We can't see you. Is your camera on? Because you just have a black screen.
Maybe type.
Maybe maybe you could put it in the chat.
The cursor. Oh, okay.
So why is the behavior of the children of the child showing some disruptive behavior? Is it because of high stress? Is it like how are they? How do we resolve that behavior issue when they're under high stress?
Yeah. So the very first thing I want to encourage you to consider is the behavior bad? Or is the behavior communicating information to us? Most kids are not bad, and their behavior is usually not bad. Okay. So we have to figure out our job as parent, caregiver, teacher, okay, is to figure out where that behavior is coming from. So we have to think about, yeah, it could be stress. They might be overwhelmed with emotions or with sensory experiences, or with some of their executive functions. Maybe if they're ripping up their paper for school, maybe they're frustrated because they didn't know how to solve the problem. They didn't know, they couldn't remember the instruction. They were being asked to do something. They didn't know what to do. So we always have to figure out, as the adult, figure out, and that sometimes can be really hard. Now, parents tend to know their kids really well. And as the year goes by, teachers know their kids really well. So we can start to figure out patterns. We can ask questions. We can sit and regulate with them. And we can show them how we might try and solve the issue. So I want to encourage you to think about behavior as telling you something. Is that helpful?
That's great. Yeah, yes, that's great. Hopefully, people will take that into consideration. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. So what can we do? What else can we do? Right? So we want to teach them how to talk themselves through issues. So one of the things that I'll often do, either with my own kids or with a kiddo in my office, is we'll take a step back and say, I don't like that, or that was hard. Don't like the way that makes me feel. I don't know what to do. Right? And we model that together. Okay. So we're going to build awareness that something is hard. And we're going to talk our way through it. Right? So we want to give them language of what that looks like. Okay. So now we can also play games or give them instructions that grows their brain. So, for example, we can use language that requires them to inhibit, right? So, for example, I want you to find something that's not big. So now they have to step and go, what does that mean? Not big. Oh, it could be medium, it could be small, it could be really small, right? Or we can work on multitasking. Now, I want you to tell me a fruit that's red and grows on trees. Okay, well, what's red and grows on trees? Huh. Well, a strawberry is red, but it doesn't grow on trees. An apple is red and it grows on trees. So is a cherry. Ah. Right. Now we had to remember all of those things and we can build on that. Okay. We can use visuals too. Right. So the more we provide, the better. We can play go, don't go games, right? So red light, green light. What time is it, Mr. Wolf? Okay. Okay. Oh, there was something else I wanted to expand on. Give me one moment and I will get there. So we also want to provide, oh, and I'll wait. Okay. So we also want to provide physical strategies. So for example, setting up a room. How do we organize that room? Or when I come in my house, I know I put my car keys in the basket, in the drawer. That's where they go. And if they are not there, I'm in trouble. Right? So we want to think about those sorts of things. How can we set them up for success and show them how to organize and plan? So daily planners, calendars. We have some wonderful things online. Okay. And I've provided some links for them. And there we go. And so some other games that you can play, some nice ones. So Uno, right? So who knew Uno would be great for executive functioning, right? So you have to be flexible because if you get a reverse card, you have to remember which way we're going, especially if there's lots of reverse cards. We have to monitor. So I just went and I'm hoping it's going to stay green, but now someone switched it to yellow. Uh-oh. Do I have any yellow? I have to plan ahead, right? So who's going to be next after me? Can I put a pickup 4? Right? Okay. Yeah. Concentration. So when we flip over and find matches, right? That's a great one because we have to focus. We have to monitor ourselves and not give away where we know things are. And we have to remember, right? Especially if we're playing with a large board. Okay. And this is a newer game, Spot It. I'm not sure how many people have experienced that game. It's a great little game. Easy. It's really, you can pick it up anywhere. It's easy to play. Doesn't require language. Okay. And so it requires working memory because we have to remember the target picture. And we have to pay attention because we have to be the first one to spot it, to get the card. Okay. Now I've put a link in here with a whole, it's a lovely website. She's put in a bunch of different games that you can play or that your child can play on their own to build executive functions. Okay. And then these are some links that I always provide in my assessments to families that I absolutely love. Okay. Okay. One that's not on there actually. Okay. I apologize, Sue, to the interpreter. Um, it's called Goblin dot Tools. And it was developed by neurodivergent folks for neurodivergent folks. And it is wonderful because it breaks down how to do tasks. So it's also called the Magic to Do. Okay, and I'll give that out, and I apologize. I meant to put that in there. I can't put the link. I will ask how to provide that all to you. It's so Yes.
Question was, we can share the link later, or would we be able to share the PowerPoint? There's a question like, would we be able to share the PowerPoint and we'll share the other link?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we can figure out how we're going to do that after we're done our Zoom, and I can make sure I get the right PDF and we get the finished product for the people who have registered. Then we can send the PowerPoint with those changes on to them. Great. Was that the last slide? Okay. Did you have more things to say, or I didn't want to cut you off? Well, I tend to go on and on, you know? That's fine. That's fine. I'm just going to move my screen around here. Give me a moment. No, I did something not right here. Okay, this is better. Okay. All right, we're all big now. So, Gail, I just want to say thank you so very much for your presentation this evening. And absolutely, we concur that language is such a stronghold for any of those development. When you spoke of the functioning and how as a child gets older, they can pick up more and more language and how crucial that is. And at this point, I just want to ask the audience if there are any additional questions that they might have. Oh, my camera just went blurry. I need to give it a moment to, not now. Timing is off. Oh, I have to refocus my camera.
I'm noticing
no.
my Wi-Fi is awful. I'm going to continue to voice so that language is accessible.
Yeah, and I know with technology, sometimes it just is what it is. If there are any parents or professionals or anybody that is watching, if you wanted to write a comment in the chat, you can do that. Or conversely, you can put your camera on and ask that question. And if you have some questions that you want during a Q&A session, or if you want to make a comment, maybe share your own perspective, this would be the time. I'm just looking at my comments and my chat to see if anything else is popping up for me. Whoa, hey, I was gonna say, no, I won't just cut off. I'll read this. Okay. Yeah, one other person said, thank you so much for your time and for sharing these amazing resources. Absolutely, I totally agree with that comment. This has been so awesome. And I think it's really been extremely beneficial to see this type of webinar happening that's Canadian based, where we're sharing the knowledge that we have here in our own country. Another person, we're getting lots of thank yous at this point and accolades. So I think I'll take the time here to wrap everything up. Once again, I want to say thank you, Gail. And I also want to thank people from all the other provinces for joining us. We will be having another webinar next month. Keep an eye out on our social media, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or through our email notifications, because we do like to touch on different topics. So if somebody has an idea of what they might want us to focus in for a webinar, let us know, and maybe we can entertain that topic for our next webinar or a future webinar. We appreciate getting feedback from the audience. One person just asked if will we be getting access to the PowerPoint through email? And yes, we're going to make sure that we provide it in a way that's needed, but we want to just wrap up and add that extra website. We can make those alterations, clean it up, and then have a finished copy that we can send to the people who registered. Also, I want to thank the Zoom host for willing to work with us and switch people in and out. It's been very successful. Thank you for the other team members that helped this all become a success, whether it's advertising and making the flyers and reaching out to people. We're hoping to continue this in the future. And I'm also wanting to thank the two interpreters this evening for staying late and continue voicing and signing and doing what they needed to do. So I appreciate their time as well. All right. Once again, thank you everybody so much and have a wonderful evening. Oh, Gail, did you want to add something? A last comment? I saw somebody asking about the assessment. There was a comment about assessment. And I am, right. Yeah, I'd be more than glad to talk about assessments. And I've done that a couple of years ago. So we'll be glad to do that. So, all right. And just thinking some other chat that's popping up. Yeah. So we'll put some of that information in the YouTube video. Yes, we will be able to do that in the video and also the PowerPoint that we're going to be sending out. I think I am ready to call it a night and walk away and maybe get some shut eye. I'm sure everybody's looking forward to calling it a night. Good night, everybody. And thanks again for being here. Well, thanks for watching me.